On October 12, 1974, a hunting party found the remains of 2 people in the dense woods of Dole Valley in Clark County, Washington. The bodies were on the ground, making it difficult to determine the cause of death due to exposure to the elements and wildlife. The case was treated as a homicide. One victim was quickly identified through dental records as 18-year-old Carol Platt Valenzuela. She had been reported missing by her husband on August 4, 1974, after last being seen hitchhiking in Vancouver, Washington, on August 2nd. She left behind 10-month-old twins. The other remains were identified as female, aged between 17 and 25, but could not be identified at the time. Newspapers from 1974 said that law enforcement believed that 2 women were murdered, but that could not say when they had been killed, due to the elements that had affected their remains. Women could have been killed at different times and were most likely dumped, not killed at the location they were found. The case would go cold quickly. The operation manager at the Clark County Medical Examiner, Nikki Costa, discovered in 2007 that the unidentified remains from the 1974 case had been mislabeled. The label was the case number for Carol Platt. It was believed this was a clinical error, but it cost them decades to identify this woman. In 2012, the remains were sent to the Bobe Cellmark Forensics for DNA analysis. A woman named Reba Morrison and her half-brother started to look into what happened to their sister, Martha Morrison. She went to look into the missing persons report that she thought had been filed. But at this point, Reba discovered that there were no records that a missing persons report had ever been made in 1974 for her sister. Martha Morrison was 17 years old, 5'4", about 140 pounds with long brown hair and hazel eyes. She'd been in foster care with her sister and was known to run away occasionally. Her mother had been deaf, and Reba was reported that she was skilled at sign language. At some point between 1973 and 1974, Martha lived in Phoenix, Arizona, where she attended Jobs Corps training and on the job training program. There she met another student and they moved in together in mid-1974 at Portland, Oregon. The man, believed to be her boyfriend, had worked at the shipyards as a welder. In September 1974, she left their apartment after a fight with a suitcase and was never seen again. In 2013, after Reba and her brother gave DNA and it was sent to the University of North Texas in the hopes of getting answers, they got a potential match to the unidentified woman from 1974. The Clark County Medical Examiner would need more DNA from family members for a more accurate DNA analysis. They tested the DNA they had from Martha's mother, which also showed the DNA consistent but inconclusive to the unidentified woman. Martha's father died in 1976, but in 2015, they exhumed his body hoping to get DNA. They got a definitive answer that the unidentified woman from 1974 was 99.9% Martha Morrison. Her case and Carol's were still open and unsolved at this time. Then, in 2015, Martha's DNA would be found on a piece of evidence. The Washington State Police started to look at evidence from a case of a suspected serial killer in the hopes of finding something to close unsolved cases. They found an unknown female DNA profile on an air pistol, and in 2015, they matched this DNA to Martha Morrison. In 2019, Warren Forrest was arrested for the first-degree murder of Martha. Warren Forrest had been incarcerated since 1974 when he was arrested after he brutally assaulted and left a woman for dead. In 1979, he went to trial for murder and was convicted. He has since been accused of several other murders and is suspected of being a serial killer. In January 2020, Forrest pleaded not to kill Martha. Guilty, and his trial was supposed to start in April 2020. His trial was pushed several times after that because of COVID-19. His trial started at the end of January 2023. On February 1st, the jury convicted Forrest after only 90 minutes of deliberation. On February 17th, Warren Forrest received his second life sentence. He remains a prime suspect in at least 5 other homicide cases, including Carol Valenzuela. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. Before we proceed, I've got an exciting surprise for you. We've launched a brand new channel dedicated to intriguing content such as old historical mysteries, cold cases, and particularly chilling horror stories perfect for bedtime. Drop a comment letting us know if you're a fan of horror stories or not. You can find the link in the description below. Let's find out who will be the first to explore it. Alright, let's dive back into the video. Peter K. Kima Jr.'s short life, which began on May 1, 1991, was marked by abuse and suffering. His parents, Peter Kima Sr. and Jaylene Maureen Akikima, subjected him to cruelty from birth. Child Protective Services, CPS, got involved soon after a family member reported the abuse. Baby Peter was found with a broken arm and leg, along with other healed fractures. His siblings also showed signs of abuse, and Peter was placed with his grandparents, James and Yolanda Ackall. Despite the clear signs of abuse, CPS returned Peter to his parents in 1995 when he was 4 years old. At that time, he had multiple fractures, black eyes, and even a spinal fracture from severe twisting. His siblings often took the blame for his injuries, with his mother claiming Peter's leg was broken when his sister jumped on him. James and Yolanda repeatedly reported the abuse, but CPS took no action. Jaylene and Peter Sr. tried to keep the grandparents away from the children, but when they did see them, they found Peter and his siblings looking frail and injured. James and Yolanda last saw Peter in 1996. They fought the courts for custody, but for some reason, they always sided with the parents. According to reports, testimony from Peter's siblings said that he once sustained a wound so deep that someone could put a finger inside of it. In 1997, the family moved out of their Nanowhale Estates home, most likely to escape the grips of CPS. Once they moved, there was little room for outside intervention as Peter had been enrolled in kindergarten, but his absences quickly got him removed from their system. This allowed Peter and Lynn to get away with their abuse even longer. Shortly after Peter's 1991 hospital admission, CFPS ordered a psychological evaluation on Peter and Lynn and reported that they had, quote, potential for abusive parenting. One support worker even wrote about Peter's explosive anger, yet nothing was done to remove the children from their care. The extent to which Peter Jr. suffered cannot be understated. His siblings would later tell their foster parents that Peter had been shot with BB guns, thrown out of a window, forced to eat dog feces, and made to sleep outside without a mattress or blanket. There are many more details of what Peter was forced to endure in his short life, and most of them are too graphic and heartbreaking to mention. The abuse against Peter would come to an end on April 26, 1998, when Jaylene Kima filed a missing person report for her 6-year-old son. She told the ILO police that she had not seen her son since August 1997, when Peter Jr. and Sr. left ILO for Honolulu. Peter Sr. later told investigators that he took his son to Honolulu while looking for employment. The two lived in a tent in Isla Park, but Peter Sr. had other arrangements in mind. This is where discrepancies begin to creep in. Peter Sr. told the Hawaii County Police Department that on August 11, 1997, he signed over custody of his son to Rose McQuackane, a family friend he called Auntie. The two had agreed to exchange custody of Peter Jr. as the chemists could no longer provide for him. Interestingly, the signed agreement that Peter Sr. produced was dated April 11, 1997, not August. So where had Peter been in that 1-month gap? Investigators knew that Peter Sr.'s story was suspicious, but lacked evidence. A year after Peter Jr. was reported missing, his 3 siblings were moved from their parents' care after further allegations of physical and other abuses. When the police pressed Peter Sr. and Jaylene for Rose's contact information or address, they could not provide it. There was no government documents or anyone by that name. Peter Jr.'s siblings, Lena, Chantel, and Alan, were interviewed by the police in the wake of his disappearance, and they provided some very disturbing information. They detailed abuse that they'd been subjected to daily. Lena, who was just 4 years old when her brother disappeared, told the police and the accompanying therapist that she had seen Peter chained and thrown into a bin. Later, she saw his lifeless body being placed into a box that had been taken to Honolulu by Peter Sr. in 2016. Jaylene and Peter Sr. were arrested and charged in their son's disappearance. The indictment stated that the investigators believed Peter had passed away due to a failure to seek medical attention. CBS reported that the family had health insurance, but Jaylene did not take him to the hospital because she feared Peter Sr. would be arrested. The indictment also noted that Peter likely succumbed to septic shock. Lena revealed that she had witnessed Jalen trying to resuscitate Peter Jr. before his body had been placed into the box. Jalen was sentenced to serve 1 year with credit for time served in exchange for her testimony against Peter Sr. Jalen would pass away in 2019. Peter Sr. was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The courts have offered him a deal where he will serve a minimum of 6 years if he leads investigators to Peter's body. Over the years, he has given conflicting statements, and his version of events has changed significantly. He recently told investigators that he threw Peter Jr.'s ashes into the ocean on the Puna coast off of Highway 137, close to Mackenzie State Park. Unfortunately, multiple searches have come up empty-handed, and investigators fear that they may never uncover the truth of what happened to little Peter Kima Jr. Peter's case has become infamous across Hawaii, with the media referring to him as Peter Boy. Peter is still considered missing, as his remains have never been retrieved. He is described as a multiracial male with Filipino, Spanish, Chinese, and Native Hawaiian background, with black hair, brown eyes, 4 feet tall, and 50 pounds. Anyone with information on Peter's case is asked to contact Captain Greg Esteban of the Hawaii Police Department. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. It was on November 3, 1994, when a housekeeper for the Honolulu Prince Hotel was making her rounds. She noted that Unit 206 and recalled seeing a Do Not Disturb sign on the door for the last 3 days, but really needed to check the room. She knocked several times, but there was no answer. She'd opted to just drop some towels off near the door and unlock the room. It was then that she made a grisly discovery. Inside was a deceased woman, and she called the police. The victim was discovered to be the long-term resident of the apartment, 37-year-old Lisa Fracassi. She had lived in the building for 6 months. She had last been seen Halloween night, and experts determined that she had likely died that same evening. Initially, detectives believed that Lisa's death had been a suicide, but her autopsy determined that she had been strangled to death. Detectives interviewed neighbors, but no one remembered any strange noises that would indicate someone had been in distress. Leave Lisa's apartment in the early morning hours, but couldn't remember any distinguishing characteristics of the man. Detectives began to look back into Lisa's life to try and find her killer. Lisa had recently broken up with her boyfriend, an ex-cop, and he had quickly been cleared as a suspect. Friends of Lisa didn't know anyone in her life that would have killed her, but she kept a wide group of friends. Lisa was incredibly caring and a giving person. If someone she knew was in trouble, she would be able to help her out. She was the kind of person to drop everything and support that person. She could always be relied upon for charitable events. She volunteered her time to help others constantly. Lisa had wanted to be a nurse, and those who knew her knew that would have been a career she could have excelled in. Originally from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, she had started her nursing degree but needed to upgrade some schooling to practice nursing in Hawaii. While she was saving for nursing school, she worked as an exotic dancer. It was her job as a dancer, which sent detectives looking for any signs of a stalker or someone she had met from her place of work. But still, nothing came up. Photographs and DNA evidence were collected from the crime scene, but never matched any of their suspects. And over time, Lisa's murder case went cold. In 2018, the HBD launched a campaign to deal with numerous unsolved murders, and in 2020, Lisa's case was put forward by the Honolulu PD for further genetic testing. With the help of the Hawaii Department of the Attorney General, they received the funding required to send a sample of DNA to Parabon Nanolabs. Parabon worked on the case for years, and in April 2022, they announced that they had found Lisa's killer. Had been 29 at the time of the murder and was a longtime resident of Hawaii, who was originally from Michigan. However, there would never be justice for Lisa as Trent died in 2013 of congestive heart failure at the age of 48. Trent had never been a suspect in the initial investigation, and little is known about how or why he killed Lisa Fracassi. Little is known about Trent. He was a retired driver according to his obituary. At this time, it is unclear if they are looking for additional victims connected to Cecil Trent. Lisa's friends and family are relieved to have some answers. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. On January 10th, 1993, two boys were playing on Seaship Place in Palm Coast, Florida, enjoying what was supposed to be another sunny day. Seaship Place is a cul-de-sac bordered by woodland and forest. While playing with their basketball, it rolled into the woods, and the boys ran to fetch it. As they searched through the brush, they stumbled upon something far more frightening than their ball: a human skull. The boys immediately ran home and told their parents about their discovery. The Flagler County Sheriff's Office quickly arrived and began an investigation. As FCSO searched the scene, they found more partial skeletal remains in the woods. They also found remnants of clothing with a pocket lining, zipper, and faded tag. They also found size 7.5 tennis shoes that were also highly degraded. Only partial skeletal remains were discovered, and the area was declared a crime scene. The remains were sent to the University of Florida for further testing, which revealed that the PMI postmortem index was around 2 years. In the report, they noted that the remains belonged to a female who was white or indigenous, aged 25 to 35 and approximately 5 feet 3 inches. Her remains showed a previous nasal fracture, although it is unknown whether this was connected to her death, and no cause of death could be determined. Teeth play a massive role in identifying the deceased, especially if the person has a unique dental profile. According to reports, most of Jane Doe's teeth had fallen out post-mortem, but they were still valuable to investigators. Her teeth showed signs of periodontal disease, which causes inflammation of the gums and the teeth. This indicated to investigators that she may not have been able to access adequate dental care. Unfortunately, her case had little public interest and it quickly went cold. It wasn't until 2021 that detectives with the Flagler County Sheriff's Office picked up her case again. This time, they had a new tool at their disposal: genetic genealogy. A sample of her DNA was sent off to Otham Labs, who assist law enforcement with DNA and genealogy in cases such as this. The results of the DNA analysis were quite shocking to investigators. Her DNA revealed that she was likely African American, possibly with Caucasian ancestors. She was not white or indigenous as they had once thought. Investigators had spent years looking through missing persons cases, potentially looking at the wrong race. Othram stated that they also believed that she had hailed from the Edgefield-Aiken in South Carolina. She was also listed as a possible descendant of George Washington Coleman. Clarissa Minnick. The FCSO and Othram Labs have contacted 30 relatives of the Flagler County Jane Doe, but so far there have been no identifications. In a bizarre twist, one of Jane Doe's relatives, Danya Williams, is also a genealogist. Investigators hope that with the advent of this new technology, they are one step closer to discovering her identity. A new facial approximation sketch was created and circulated around the US. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. On August 27, 1978, two hunters set out on an early morning expedition in the Finley Creek Crow Camp close to Elgin, Oregon. The two quietly walked through the trees and suddenly saw something in the distance. It was a skull sticking out of the ground. When they got closer, they discovered a shallow grave that contained human skull and other skeletal remains. The Oregon State Police were called to the scene, and what they uncovered was a shock them to their core. Experts would later determine that the remains had been buried in about a 5-foot by 4-foot grave and that the remains had been laid face down. Pathologist Dr. Judy Bucksack completed the initial examination of the remains, determining that they belonged to a white or unknown race woman aged 14 to 25 with light brown sandy blonde hair who was 5'1" to 5'4", weighing 114 to 140 pounds. At the scene, investigators had recovered a series of tiny bones. When the remains were sent to the Oregon Crime Lab for further analysis, scientists determined that the woman had been in her 6th to 8th month of pregnancy, and that these bones belonged to her unborn child. At the crime scene, investigators also found a nylon cord 4 feet long and a 2-foot-long radio cord. There were also clothing items belonging to the woman, including a bra, red pants, lace-up shoes, and some red and white cloth and zippers. The post-mortem index believed that the woman has been deceased from anywhere from 2 to 3 years, with animal activity having compromised the integrity of the remains. The Oregon State Police have made several appeals to the public for information. In 1979, witnesses reported finding an abandoned camp close to where Finley Creek Jane Doe and her baby were found. More detailed descriptions of the camp are available online, but the critical pieces of evidence discovered were about 30 to 40 feminine pads, a blue windbreaker, a pair of boots that bore the name Fox Holman and Stepton. Over the years, several victims have been ruled out. Sherry Pickle, Dana Lou Sanchez, Melanie Flynn, Laura Flink, Rita Jolly, Laura Partridge, and Teresa Flitton. Dozens of loved ones have come forward with DNA samples and information, but so far no match has been found. Unfortunately, in 1990, the Union County District Attorney destroyed all the evidence in this case, including the remains to be destroyed. The Finley Creek Jane Doe and her unborn child were cremated in Walla Walla. Since her cremation, nobody has been able to find her remains. No records were kept. Investigators have lost track of them. Whilst authorities had little care or compassion for Finley Creek Jane Doe, doesn't mean there aren't others who are willing to step up to the plate. Redgrave Research Forensic Services have created 2 approximate sketches from photographs of Jane Doe's skull. They are also in the process of extracting and sequencing DNA, the costs of which were covered by generous donations from the public. Redgrave is quietly working on this case in the background, but there have been no recent updates. It has been speculated that Finley Creek Jane Doe may have fallen victim to a serial killer, Gary Ridgway. Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, operated in Washington and Oregon, and the exact span of his crimes is unknown, and he may have been active as early as the 1970s, right up to 2001. According to the Doe Network, some have speculated that the Finley Creek Jane Doe is somehow connected to the Lewis-Clark Valley murders between 1979 and 1982 in Idaho and Washington. The timelines and locations don't quite match up, but as a suspect has never been apprehended in the Lewis-Clark Valley murders, it's hard to say. In 2022, Suzanne Timms came forward to Redgrave and the OCP stating that she believes Finley Creek Jane Doe is her mother, Patty Otto, who disappeared on August 31, 1976. Autopsy records do not match that of Finley Creek Jane Doe. Still, Suzanne told that Landgrove Observer, quote, "The discrepancy is due to an error made by the OCP's medical examiner, whilst doing examinations of the skeletal remains of 2 Jane Does in his office at about the same time in 1978. She later stated that the dental records from the report of the second Jane Doe matched her mother. So far, no confirmation has been made. In the case of the Finley Creek Jane Doe remains unsolved. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. October 8, 1976 started like any other day for Norman Skog, a farmer in the small town of Otterbein, Indiana. As the afternoon wore on, Norman slowly began to finish work for the day when he encountered something bizarre in one of his many fields, just off County Road 200. It was a white box, only this box wasn't a small discarded piece of rubbish. When he tried to lift it out of his field so that he could plow, he noticed that it was unusually heavy and called for help. Norman then loaded the box into the truck and took it to his home a few miles away. The Skog family crowded around the box to see what treasures lay inside, but instead of golden riches, they were hit with a pungent smell, the familiar stench of decay. The box also emitted a strong, flowery, perfumey smell, almost as someone had tried to cover the stench. Norman began cutting through the layers of tape, plastic, and rope, and discovered a broken perfume bottle. When they got past a few layers, they collectively recoiled in horror. Inside the 3-foot-long, 2-foot-wide, and 1-foot-tall box lay the remains of a woman. The Indiana State Police and the Benton County Sheriff's Office were called to the scene shortly after. The Indiana State Police began slicing through more layers of tape and plastic. They found that the human remains inside with that of a woman tied in the fetal position. During the autopsy, it was determined that she was Caucasian, 55 to 65 years old, with light brown, graying hair, around 5'1" and 160 pounds. And her cause of death was a gunshot wound to the skull. It was discovered that the woman, who had become known as the Benton County Jane Doe, or the Box Lady of Benton County, had undergone a right radical mastectomy, likely as a result of cancer. This procedure had produced a scar that ran from her belly button to her sternum and multiple other scars on her right breast. She had been fully dressed at the time of her discovery, and she was found in a green double-knit pantsuit, green slacks, a beige slip, and a beige girdle. There is a multitude of bizarre clues and red herrings in this case, the first being the box. According to the Doe Network, the white box she was found in was manufactured by a company in Melrose Park, Illinois, by May through October of 1976. The box had only been distributed to Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and was mainly used to move furniture. There was also another bizarre clue when it came to the box. Norman Skog had described the weather that October afternoon as drizzly and dreary. The rain had been pouring since early morning on October 8th, but the box had been bone dry when it was found. The pathologist determined that she'd been dead for at least 1 to 2 weeks. So where had she been stored? How did she get there? Perhaps the most bizarre part of the case is figuring out how she got there in the first place. Norman didn't report seeing any tire tracks when he discovered the box. So how did someone get in and out of his fields undetected? Otterbein is a very isolated community made up primarily of farmers. The small town gets few visitors during the day when the farmers are hard at work because the roads are quiet. But investigators don't believe that the Benton County Jane Doe arrived by car. They believe she arrived by helicopter. Other farmers in the area reported seeing a helicopter flying overhead but thought nothing of it. If a helicopter had been used, it would explain why there were no tire tracks or footprints. The question is, who could afford a private helicopter used to dump a body? This theory opens a larger can of worms, and the speculation runs rife from here on out. Some have suggested that the woman's calloused hands indicate that she may have worked as a cleaner or a maid. One theory is that the Benton County Jane Doe worked for someone very important or someone conducting clandestine business. Either way, this theory goes that Jane Doe overheard something she shouldn't have and was taken care of before she could snitch. In 2019, the Benton County Jane Doe's body was exhumed so a fresh DNA sample could be obtained. In 2021, the Jane Doe Project teamed up with the Benton County Sheriff's Office to assist them in their identification. So far, no matches have been made and the DNA Doe Project continues its work. A new burial was crowdfunded for Benton County Jane Doe, replacing her cheap coffin and headstone with something more fitting. Investigators know that someone out there holds the key to this mystery. It's just a matter of getting them to talk. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. On December 21st, 1988, 2 road workers got the shock of their lives as they were working off of Duncan Road in Ware County, Georgia. They were clearing out an illegal dump site just off the road. The workers found a TV cabinet that gave them an uneasy feeling. When they opened the cabinet up, they found concrete in a suitcase. Inside the suitcase lay a duffel bag. Neither man dared to look any further and immediately called the police. The discovery shook the workers, and things were only about to get worse. After cordoning off the scene, investigators carefully opened the double bag and found a brown blanket with something poking out underneath. After carefully lifting the blankets so as to not disturb evidence, they came across the body of a little girl. Investigators were left traumatized by their discovery, and her body was transported to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy. The medical examiner stated that the girl was black, aged 3 to 4 years old, with black hair pulled into a ponytail, and stood around 2 feet 9 inches and 25 pounds. Her ears had been pierced, but no earrings were present, and she'd been dressed in white pajama top with red-pink pony symbol, white thermal pajama pants with maroon trim, and she was wearing a disposable diaper. Her post-mortem index had listed anywhere between 1 to 3 months, and the medical examiner had been unable to determine a cause of death. Little information is available about baby Jane Doe. She was also received little media attention. The Georgia Bureau of Investigations, along with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, are involved in baby Jane Doe's case, and they have recently obtained a DNA sample for further analysis. According to the JBI, they have searched as far as Michigan, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina in a bid to identify this child. JBI agent Jason Seacrest told News4Jax that the recent identification of the boy in the box, Joseph Sorelli, has given them hope that this case will eventually be solved. The JBI is currently conducting its own genealogical research, which they hope will create a family tree of baby Jane Doe. From there, they hope to eliminate people one by one until they hopefully reach her parents. Agent Seacrest went on to say, quote, "I truly believe that somebody remembers a little girl, and that little girl went away, and most likely they were given a story that they went to or that they went on to live a better life, and nobody ever saw or heard from that little girl ever again." JBI is offering a $5,000 reward for any information that leads to her identification. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today, we're discussing the very mysterious deaths surrounding Nathan Carman, who is now 29 years old and accused of murdering his mother during a fishing trip, as well as his grandfather. Let's get into it. On December 20th, 2013, Elaine Chakalos pulled into the driveway of her father's home in Windsor, Connecticut. Elaine had been checking in on her father periodically after the passing of his wife, her mother. Inside, she found her 87-year-old father, John Chakalos, still in bed, shot execution style in the head 3 times while he slept. It is believed that John was shot with a .308 caliber gun, likely a rifle. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing was stolen. Police quickly began investigating those who knew John and had access to the home. In his early years, John had enlisted in the U.S. Army and served as a private paratrooper in the Philippines during World War II. In high school, he met Rita Baranowski, who would later become his wife. They were married for 59 years, but in November 2013, Rita lost her battle with cancer, only a month before her husband was murdered. The two had 4 daughters together: Valerie, Elaine, Charlene, and Linda. John had dedicated his life to his family and his communities. His personal motto is quoted as, "Without family, you've got nothing. Family is everything." He had many grandchildren as well as nieces and nephews that he showered with affection. After his military career, John founded a real estate development company that he ran until he died. He built several retirement communities that he named after his children, and he was in the process of building one when he was murdered. This career made him millions, with his corporation being extremely successful. John and Rita were known in the community for being very charitable. One of their most notable contributions was their annual Christmas light display they put out outside their 86-acre New Hampshire home. The display boasted over 6 million Christmas lights and would draw huge crowds. They did this for over a decade, and they would ask for donations, and all proceeds would go to a local food bank. John's net worth was over $300 million. So before he died, he'd set up trust funds for his grandchildren and the Dynasty Trust for his children. Those in the Dynasty Trust could make someone the beneficiary of their portion of the estate when they died. A Dynasty Trust is a long-term trust designed to pass wealth from generation to generation. His 5 daughters were each set to receive $7 million each as their portion of the estate. During John's murder investigation, authorities turned to Linda Carman, John's second daughter, due to an altercation that happened a couple of years prior. News outlets report that on April 2011, there had been an altercation between the two. The incident reported that John came to visit his grandson, Nathan, when he'd been committed to a psychiatric facility for depression. John then told Linda that he would no longer support them and that he'd only been doing it for his grandson. When John tried to leave, Linda stopped him and started hitting him in the head, scratching and kicking him. Linda is quoted by the police saying, "My father is worth $300 million and I want my share. He's not going to cut me off. I need the money." Another report said that the fight was about who should pay for Nathan's hospital bill, which resulted in Linda assaulting her father. Linda had apparently had a hard time keeping a job at this time and was reliant on her father for money, giving him financial control. Nathan's grandfather is reported to have been very interested in Nathan and spent as much time as possible with him. The two were close, and Nathan was known to rely on his grandfather since his relationship with his parents were strained. His parents had been divorced since he was young, and his father lived in California. At this time, Nathan lived with his mother in Middleton, Connecticut. Linda was charged with assault of an elderly person and disturbing the peace. In July 2011, the charges were dropped because John didn't want his daughter prosecuted. After this, John spent a lot more time with his grandson Nathan, bringing him to meetings and paying for all the expenses, including an apartment nearby. And in 2012, Nathan graduated high school. Nathan mostly only saw his mother on fishing trips that they took together. Some reports speculated that he'd become estranged from his parents. Nathan had been diagnosed with Asperger's at a young age. Though today it's no longer a diagnosis on its own, it is now encapsulated within the spectrum of autism. At the time, Asperger's was categorized as a neurodevelopment condition that is characterized by difficulties in social interactions, restricted interests, difficulty with change, incredible attention to detail, recognizing patterns, and remarkable focus. Because of this, Nathan had difficulties making friends and struggled at school. Emotional outbursts. Classmates are reported to have bullied him, and Nathan lashed out physically because of it. He was also ashamed and upset about his Asperger's diagnosis, as he felt it made him more different than other students. His only real friend was his horse, Cruz. Between 2012 and 2013, John had set up 2 bank accounts that Nathan was a beneficiary of when he died. One account was for college in the future, worth $150,000, and a second worth $400,000, which both Linda and Nathan were the beneficiaries of. Before his death, John had also convinced his daughter to make Nathan her beneficiary for her portion of the dynasty trust. After John's death, Linda was brought in for questioning. She was asked to do a polygraph test, which she took and passed. Police no longer considered her a suspect in her father's murder. At the same time, the now 19-year-old Nathan Carmen was also being interviewed by law enforcement. He was also asked to do a polygraph, but he refused. Nathan was the last person to see his grandfather alive. The two had dinner the night John was murdered. Law enforcement found out that Nathan also had recently gotten a New Hampshire driver's license and had used it to purchase a rifle in the same caliber as the gun used to shoot John Chakalas. When asked about the rifle, Nathan stated it had gone missing. Law enforcement got a search warrant for Nathan's home. While executing the search warrant, law enforcement discovered that Nathan had removed the hard drive from his desktop computer and removed the GPS out of his truck and disposed of both before police could look at the information. Nathan was never formally charged, and John's murder investigation remains open and ongoing. And law enforcement has made it clear that Nathan Carmen remains a suspect in that investigation. Nathan did receive the $550,000 in inheritance and remained unemployed. He had purchased a foreclosed home in Vermont and had been working on it in hopes of flipping it. But by 2016, the money had run out. On September 17, 2016, Nathan Carmen, now 22, planned a fishing trip with his mother on his boat called Chicken Pox. The two left a Rhode Island marina around midnight and were due to return the next day. Before they left, Linda texted a family friend saying that they planned to return the next day, and the two made plans for later that afternoon. However, Linda never made it to that meeting and wasn't returning calls or texts. By Sunday night, the friend reported the pair missing to the Coast Guard, who then started to search for the vessel. Helicopters, ships, and planes in the area searched hundreds of thousands of miles of open ocean. This extensive search continued until September 24th, a week after they'd gone missing. There was no report that a Mayday had ever been sent out. The search parties found no sign or evidence of the two or their vessel. On September 25th, 8 days later, the search was called off. The hopes of finding Linda and Nathan Carmen weren't looking promising. It then came as a miracle when reports came into the Coast Guard about a man in distress in a life raft. The man was found by a Chinese freighter, the Orient Lucky, off the coast of Martha's Vineyard floating in a life raft. Once in the safety of the freighter, the man revealed his name as Nathan Carmen and had been lost at sea for days. His mother Linda was not with him. After being rescued, Nathan asked if they had found his mother. On a call with the Coast Guard, he detailed what had happened. He said that he and his mother had gone out on September 17th and they had planned to go tuna fishing in an area called Block Canyon, an area he had never fished out before, was significantly further than where he normally went, and an area not suitable for the size of his boat. It was so far out that the Coast Guard hadn't been looking for them way out there. He alleged that he noticed the boat was taking on water. Initially, he said that he wasn't concerned. He said he'd gone to get the repair kit while his mother was taking in the fishing equipment. He said that they were on opposite ends of the ship and he had the safety equipment. He said that while he was trying to repair the leak, he noticed the boat sinking. He said it was then that he deployed the life raft, and in all of the chaos, he never saw his mother again. He'd been able to get into the life raft with the emergency bag and he watched the boat sink in minutes. He said that he never saw his mother after he grabbed the safety gear. His story had changed slightly for different people. Some have reported that Nathan has also said he tried to save his mother but couldn't. Linda was never recovered and is presumed deceased. Now Nathan and Linda frequently went on fishing trips. The two were both knowledgeable and capable boaters. In Nathan's version of events, there were multiple things that weren't adding up. Experts stated that in order to go for tuna, you normally have a 4 or 5 person team to fish for something as large and as powerful as tuna. It isn't something that should be taken on a whim. It requires specialized equipment, and it's recommended to take someone with experience. Bluefin tuna can get up to 13 feet long and weigh 2,000 pounds. Additionally, Nathan's boat was not big enough to catch bluefin. There was no evidence that Nathan had ever purchased the equipment required to catch tuna. There was also a working distress beacon on his boat and other equipment that Nathan never tried to use. The distress beacon would have given the Coast Guards a signal that would have led them to their exact location. When asked, Nathan said that there hadn't been time, but it was just a switch. Where he said the leak was, it was right next to it. Nathan then said that he hadn't anticipated the boat would sink. He stated that he initially felt he could fix the problem himself, but the boat sank too quickly. Authorities started looking into Nathan for charges of reckless endangerment that caused death. Nathan was reported to have just done a series of repairs on the boats. Other boaters who saw the tools he was using alleged that he might have purposely and not seaworthy. Witnesses at the marina would later come forward, saying that they saw Nathan making holes in the boat before it left the marina, and that he knew it was not safe. Claims that Nathan denied, saying that he thought the boat was safe, and no charges were filed at this time. Law enforcement got another search warrant to search his home and his mother's home. Nathan's computer was never recovered, and it is believed to have been removed before the trip. After losing his mother at sea in October 2016, Nathan put in an insurance claim for his boat for $85,000 in January 2017. The insurance company denied his claim. The claim would come up in court, and a judge would rule in favor of the insurance company. There hadn't been enough evidence to prove that the chickenpox was seaworthy. It was during this trial that the previous owner testified, and based on photographs and CCTV footage of the boat, he could tell that Nathan had made several modifications that he felt were unsafe. In July 2017, Valerie Santilli, Nathan's aunt, also the executor of John Chacalo's estate, filed a lawsuit in New Hampshire probate court alleging that Nathan had killed both John and Linda Carmen in an attempt to inherit millions of dollars. The lawsuit was started to prevent Nathan from collecting Linda's portion of the legacy trust. Could not profit from their deaths. In 2018, Nathan attempted to get his aunt removed as the executor of his grandfather's estate. However, that never went forward. Eventually, by 2019, the lawsuit would be moved to Connecticut court, as it is where John was a resident and is still in probate court today. Nathan's aunts are convinced that Nathan killed their father and sister. They are fighting legally to make sure he does not receive anything from either estate. Through all the investigations, which have included local law enforcement and the FBI, Nathan maintains his innocence in the deaths of his mother and grandfather. In May 2022, the case went to a grand jury. The grand jury alleged that, quote, beginning in or around 2013 and continuing until the present, Nathan Carmen devised a scheme to defraud the estate, John Chacalo, its executor, the Dynasty Trust, and its trustees, and to obtain money from the Dynasty Trust by materially false and fraudulent pretenses, representations, and promises. In May 2022, Nathan was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the deaths of his mother, along with 4 counts of wire fraud and 3 counts of mail fraud. Court records show that Nathan had removed 2 forward-facing bulkheads and trim tabs from his boat and was masking these as repairs. Additionally, the court ruled that Nathan had gone out to sea a lot further than was necessary for a fishing trip, and he purposely made their rescue impossible by not sending out that distress signal. In August 2022, Nathan was remanded without bail. Nathan's aunts have continued to be vocal about their belief that Nathan killed their father and Linda. There's still been no formal charge made in the murder of John Chakalos. Court records for the case of Linda Carmen do state the belief that Nathan murdered his grandfather. Authorities have stated that he is a person of interest, and the case remains open. It is believed that Nathan, having spent time with his grandfather and John's financial, and started an elaborate scheme which included killing his grandfather and his mother in hopes of inheriting millions. Nathan is now 28 and has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Nathan has not been convicted of these charges, and his trial has been set for October 2023. If convicted, Nathan faces life in prison for the murder and up to 30 years for the fraud charges. What do you think about it? Tell us your thoughts in comments below. Let's continue. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.